We've got a lot of information to fit into this 1 hour panel today, but before we get started, I just wanted to let everybody know this was designed to be very interactive. So of course we'll share our experiences, but we hope to learn from you as well, not only to answer your questions if we can, but also to think of you as experts from your experience. So I'd like everyone to, before we start, just think of a couple questions in mind, and if we don't answer them during the initial presentation, please raise your hand because we hope to keep this very interactive. I'm very happy to have Mark and Jane with us today, and I'll let them explain their background based on their experience, but as a brief introduction, Jane has started her own brand of products sourcing from all across Asia. Last year she was on our panel as well and had a lot of experience to convey to the audience in terms of quality issues, how do you pick a partner across Asia in different countries, dealing with agents and such. So she has her own brand and we'll tell you about that. Mark is with the International Trade Council and involved in advising Australian businesses about how to buy from Asia, but more importantly, how do you actually get the product into this country in terms of what are the standards, testing, duty rates. So between our panel, we'll offer both how do you find the product and manage the suppliers, as well as getting it into the country, which can be kind of tricky, especially when you're dealing with toys or products that touch the human body, like fashion and such. As you can tell, I'm neither Australian or Chinese, so what am I doing on this panel? But I'm an American and I've been based in Asia for 20 years, and I advise a lot of Australian companies on doing business, particularly in China. And I'll go into my background a little bit later. But maybe we could start the seminar, Jane, if you wouldn't mind. Just spend a few minutes and tell the team about your experience and maybe a couple of tips that you had along the way.
If anyone says it's easy, it's never easy. That will be my first tip. I had an idea. I had an idea of a product I wanted to do, and I nutted it out here and had a good look at it. And I was, if I say a mum with 4 kids sitting at home, no, I actually was working and I did have a business background. But what I did was I got my information and I took off for China. Now, I didn't just land in China on my own. I had help from another source who said, I can get an agent to work with you. But even though I had an agent that worked with me, I commuted every fortnight. It was like getting on a train. I got on a plane. In Monday morning at Tullamarine, I would see the same people. We would nod. Off to, Shenzhen, off to Guangzhou, yep, same. Friday, you're on the commute flight out, yep, see you Friday. That's what it's all about. So if you decide to do something yourself, it's doable, you can do it, but you need to ask a lot of questions along the way. And if anyone says to you, it's a breeze, I can do it, ask them what they did and who helped them behind, because everyone helps you behind. So they're my key tips.
Would you mind telling me a little bit about the brand and the products that you have?
I designed a bed linen product and I patented my bed linen product as well. So my product is in Australian terms, a doona cover or a quilt cover with a top shed attached. Now, when you're thinking about it, you'll be thinking, how's it attached? What does it look like? So imagine me explaining this to a manufacturer that, this is what I want. We're talking duvet now. So I want a duvet cover and I want it attached. How am I going to attach it? I'm going to attach it with snaps. What sort of snaps? Well, studs. What sort of studs? Are they going to be metal? Are they going to be plastic? I want a zip in the middle. What sort of zip? Do you want a long zip, a short zip, white, black, grey? Everything you do has a question behind it. And there's something that I saw, quite early in the piece, and it was an Australian company that were making light switches, and they had put on it sample. And when their product came into Australia, it had on it sample on every single one, because everything is taken literally. So what you ask for is what you get, right down to that last little detail. So you have to think everything out. Now, you may not have that background. I didn't. I had no background in textiles and I had to learn. Thread count is what we talk about here in Australia, but it's actually not based on thread count. It's a grey fabric, and then what do you do with the grey fabric? How do you colour it? What is the composition of the fabric? How do you get it to 300 thread count? Is it a single weave? Is it a double weave? Is it Dolby? Is it, a plaid? All these things that I went, I don't know, tell me, what should I do? So you're learning and asking at the same time, but you've got in your mind what your product is, and then you have to evolve with it. Very, very important.
Thanks. Mark? if you'd mind.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Mark Coleman. I represent the Australian International Chamber of Commerce, and I sort of help importers and exporters organise the movement. I have a logistics company based out at Melbourne Airport, with offices in Sydney, Newcastle, and our own office in Shanghai. We see a lot of first-time importers who are bringing cargo in, and a lot of it is, as Jane was saying, about asking questions. And the biggest problem I see is a lot of people don't ask enough questions. Cargo's arriving in Australia, and then they're coming to us and they're saying, oh, I've got a container load or a few pallet loads arriving. Can you clear it through customs? And all of a sudden they get a bill. I didn't think it would cost that much. Oh, there's duty and there's taxes. And so what we're encouraging people to do is to ask more questions, get a lot more information before placing orders, getting in contact with your logistics and customs agents and finding out what are the duty rates. If it's woven or knitted, it can have a different duty rate. If it's coming from this country versus that country, it can have a different duty rate. And so by getting these type of information in advance, it sometimes can actually help you choose where you're going to choose, where your supplier is going to be coming from. We've now got this free trade agreement with China just come in. Is that going to open up that market that we can bring product in? Then again, you may want to be bringing it in from Fiji. That may be a better option. So what we sort of offer through the Chamber is putting first-time importers in contact with people who can help you answer a lot of these questions that you don't even know you need to ask sometimes. So, and prior to working in logistics, I also worked at the Westpac Bank handling foreign currencies, and I've seen a lot of people, they factor in the price. I can buy it for this price, I can land it for this price, I know my duty and taxes. They then organise to place the order, and from when you place the order to when it arrives, it can be a 2, 3, 4 month difference. And in that time, the exchange rate has moved against you. Your product, where you were going to be competitive, you're probably now going to be the most expensive person in the market. So even chatting with your bank in regards to, you're looking at importing is a very important step in importing from Asia.
Thanks. Glad to have you on the panel. As a brief background, just as an introduction, I came to Asia about over 20 years now as an exchange student. I went to Japan to study factory management and quality control in Tokyo and Osaka. And in '93, I had some time off, so I put a backpack on, and by myself I wandered from Bali to Bangkok to Beijing and everywhere in between. And when I got to China in the '93, I was just blown away. Keep in mind that Tiananmen Square was '89, so all the foreigners left China. And then I show up in '93. Those factories, they were ready to go international in China in '89, but thanks to Tiananmen, everything stopped. So I show up as a young student with no business experience, and I'm walking around the streets of China with a backpack on. And Chinese people are coming up to me, in broken English, do you speak English? Can you be our representative to help open the American market? No business experience, just by being a foreigner on the ground. So I said to myself, I am wasting my time studying Japanese, and the day after, I enrolled in a language program in Manchuria, studied language for 2 years in China, finished up my MBA, and then I thought, wow, all these products in China, these suppliers ready to find foreign buyers, I'm gonna get rich, I'll start a trading company. So I did general trading, everything from fashion products to electronics to home hardware, you name it, Christmas trees, just everything you could think of. And I lost a lot of money. So somehow I survived, but it was a real education for me. So after doing that for 3 years and kind of barely surviving in around the turn of the millennium, I guess it was '99, I said to myself, if I'm based on the ground here and I'm still losing money and having so many headaches, imagine what it must be like buying from overseas. So I said, I'll start a sourcing agency where I can represent the foreign buyers in China and help them overcome some of these hurdles of price and quality and lead time. And so that actually started to work, and we grew and grew, and then my lucky break came when one of my customers, he came to me and said, Mike, your team's doing a great job finding the suppliers in China, but we want to roll out some new packaging and some new designs. And if we tell this giant supplier in China our packaging, because it's not patent protected, they'll just copy it and sell it to their other clients. Because the factory had like 4,000 people, offices around the world. So the customer said, Mike, set up a small assembly center in China where the bill of material can be delivered to you, and then your people kit it together. So I hired 5 girls to sit in an apartment that I rented next door, and we just kitted product together. And then I realized, well, if I touch the product, then I can not only manage the supply chain better, because when you ask a supplier, is it ready to ship on Wednesday? They might say yes, but you're not sure if it really is ready. But if you're touching it, when I say it's going to ship Wednesday, I know because it's in my hands. Also, we can check the quality, do that black box manufacturing to protect the secret sauce, if you will. So as soon as we did that, we started to grow really fast, and now, at 15 years later, we have over 150 employees in the operation in China. We're responsible for managing $250 million US worth of supply chain, and I didn't know as much as you know now when I started the company, so kind of being in the right place at the right time can help a lot. So that was my lucky break 15 years ago. Today, I retired from I still own the business, but I retired from the sourcing agency about 3 years ago to take some time off and went to a beach in Thailand and spent 3 months writing a book about my adventures and a guide to doing business in China. So if you type my name and go to Amazon and look up China Sourcing Reference Guide, you'll find the 300-page book that I wrote. So today I'm involved in 3 things. I do a lot of volunteer work. It's a pleasure to host conferences like this, and we've done them. And I was just in Johannesburg last week, and then before that, Miami, Hong Kong, Dubai, Mumbai. So get to travel around a lot and meet international buyers and talk about issues in Asia. So I'm a volunteer most of my time. I also, for a handful of customers, sit on their board of directors and serve as an advisor to consult on, be their China guy. Mike, what does this mean? The supplier's saying this, interpret it. So that's a lot of fun. And finally, I'm an investor. I own or have invested in some China-based businesses, everything from manufacturing partnerships with toy manufacturers, injected plastics, electronics. Also have some investments in not only my sourcing agency, but a law firm, an engineering firm. So I dabble in a little bit. But at the end of the day, I don't say that I'm an expert on Asia business because it's so big and it's changing so fast. I'm just here to convey to you some of the mistakes that I made, some of the best practices that I learned along the way, in hopes that you don't fall into the same traps that I did early on in my career. So I'm happy to join this panel today, and let's dive right into it. I'm sure you have a lot of questions, but let me ask a few softball questions initially to get things started. Jane, could you give us a little bit of background on with the products that you're importing into Australia? We're going to talk a lot today about how to find the supplier. But let's assume that some people in our audience already have found their supplier. What should they be thinking about on the importation into Australia in particular?
A couple of the things you really need to look at when you import into Australia. If you've got the product ready, you've got your manufacturer. Exactly as Mark was saying, the costs of landing it. For example, if you bring a product into Australia unhemmed versus hemmed, there is a difference in the tax. So can you bring your product into Australia in a secondary form and can you put it together here? Would that save you, costs on it? Have you thought about your packaging? Is your packaging going to suit our market? Does it look really good, but actually it won't sit on a shelf? Are you going to be an online seller or are you going to be a bricks and mortar? The packaging you use will be very different. And when you actually source a manufacturer for the product and something that you want to do, you actually build your own packaging as well. So it's not just the product, it's the packaging that goes with it. You can, of course, buy off-the-shelf products, and then they'll have a range of packaging for you. But there's a lot of things you need to think of as you go, and where you're getting from. Is one product better from one country to another country? So look at your different countries as well. Don't just assume that China is the best place, and believe me, I manufacture in China. However, I do also source other countries. So look at different countries as well.
Thanks. Mark, on that note, so Jane has just mentioned it's important to make sure that your product complies with standards, but how do we, if I'm importing pens into Australia, how do I know what the standards are? With so many different products out there, where do we go?
So the government for certain products have certain standards that need to be met, and a lot of people are leaving it to the last minute. They're bringing the product in, or they've already paid for the product. Then they're coming to someone like us in customs and saying, look, I'm bringing in this particular product, and we'll ask questions. What's it made out of? Is it painted? What type of paint? And there's been some big cases recently where some very big toy manufacturers have brought in product where there was a very high lead content, and then there's massive costs there. So you can actually go to a customs agent and actually ask them those type of questions. This is the product that I'm bringing in. What are the standards that I need? What is the labelling? Just the simple of, you go, oh, I can make up a box, I'll just put that on it. But there are certain details that need to be mentioned on the actual packaging. So it's no use bringing a box bringing the product into Australia, fully boxed. It arrives, customs inspect it, go, look, the details on the packaging isn't correct. You then need to, before you're able to sell it, it needs to be sent somewhere to be totally repacked. Now that could totally blow your costs out of the water. So it's important to chat to a customs agent, a logistics company in advance, send through some photos, maybe a sample, and say, look, this is the product. What do I need to do to meet the Australian design rules, the Australian standards? We will then come back to you with those details, and then you can go back to your supplier and say, look, you've got to make sure it does this. It's got to meet this certain type of standards and so forth. So once again, talking well in advance with a logistics company to get those type of details.
Will the logistics company or the freight forwarder charge an upfront fee for that advisory service, or is it an exchange for getting the business, the moving of logistics?
Generally, if it's just some questions of what are the Australian standards, they will actually give you that information free of charge. What we find a lot that I'll spend hours and hours with customers giving this free advice of that, and a lot of it is in the hope that, well, I've helped you out as much and you'll do the honourable thing and give the works through to it. But it is a very competitive industry, and a lot of that information is free. Sometimes it's quick and easy. If there are times where we do need to have meetings with government officials in relation to it, well, there may be a charge. But in the textile industry, a lot of that information will be given to you free of charge. So if it's free, why wouldn't you be out seeking that in advance?
Excellent. Okay, I see a lot of people taking down notes and trying to catch up. Please know that we're recording the whole thing and we'll post it on YouTube afterwards, so don't stress out about keeping the notes, and we'll be happy to share that. The organizer of the conference will put it on the website. So that we can tailor our discussion to your interests and concerns, let me get a show of hands. Who in the audience, first time buying from Asia, never sourced before? How many people fit that? Okay. How many people have, say, more than 3 years? Is there anybody in the audience that has been buying from Asia for more than 3 years? Okay, great. All right. The next question is, everybody wants the good price. We understand that. But how many people would put quality control as their number one concern? Okay. How about logistics and customs clearance? You're worried about how to move the product. Is that a number one concern for people? Okay. How about the intellectual property? For example, the idea that you have. You're worried that maybe a supplier might knock you off. Okay, we have a few there. Well, then we have a lot to talk about for the next 45 minutes. Let's open it up to the audience, and let's deal with quality control first. So if you have questions that relate to quality control, please raise your hand, and we'll do our best to get them sorted. Okay. All right, right in the front.
Pamela, how do you ensure labour standards of the business? How do you look at the quality of the workforce and the way they're being treated?
Great. For those that maybe didn't hear, we're talking about compliance issues with labor standards. How do you make sure that your supplier is paying overtime, not employing underage workers, that type of thing? Well, in textiles, I know that that's pretty serious. Maybe you could answer it from not only a China perspective, but Pan-Asia, across Asia.
I did a lot of the commute myself, so even though I had an agent, I did that. I actually gave them a list of things I wanted, and one of them was that I wanted ethical companies to do my manufacturing, so they interviewed companies and went through it. Surprisingly enough to a lot of people, the US drives huge quality control programs against using underage staff, and they consistently go into factories and they monitor who they're employing, how they're employing them, what their conditions are like. I sat and ate lunch with the workers whenever I'm there, and we had a good laugh, with my Chinese being 0. and their English being 0, so we just nod and laugh. But they will tell you, they'll happily show you where they sleep if they sleep on site. They'll tell you that they like their day. Majority of factories will do 5 or 6 days, but that tends to be common practice. They'll start at about 8 in the morning, but the one I use, they go till 5 in the afternoon. If they do a later shift, it's usually coming into our Christmas rush or the Chinese New Year end of, because then they go home. You can ask for ethical standards in manufacturing companies. So if that's really a concern, make sure your agent does that for you.
Yeah, talking about the quality aspect of it, not so much on the ethical standards, but in regards to quality, I find that a lot of people, they'll find a manufacturer and they'll think that they can manage it back here from Australia. As Jane was saying, that every week over there, you've got to build up a relationship. There will be times where the manufacturer, for whatever reasons, will look at cutting quality, whether they're busy, whether they're getting squashed on margins, and sometimes if they've got that relationship with yourself, you're back there regularly and you're trying to work as a team rather than just trying to screw them down to the absolute bottom dollar price and there's no relationship. That's where you can receive an entire container load of rubbish and you've spent all that money on the product, the freight, the taxes, and you've ended up with a product that you didn't quite expect. So don't think that you can sit here in Australia and manage your entire importing process there. If you're scared of flying, importing may not be the business to be getting into, because relationships is massive when you're looking at importing.
On that note, it can sound intimidating. Wow, we need to fly over there a lot. I think the point is that you need to have some feet in the street, regardless if it's your own or someone else. But a lot of buyers don't realize that the factory audits that can handle compliance issues, going in and checking out the dormitory, how's the food, any workplace violations. Those types of audits now are almost a commodity. You could go online and look up, whatever country, whatever industry, then auditor, and on Google you will find plenty of choices, and the professional firms will charge a few $100 Australian to spend a day at your factory. So you can engage third parties to help you determine if your supplier is compliant. Also, the large suppliers, especially if they're dealing with any retailers in Australia or America, they've already been pushed to pass certain certificates. So like WRAP's a big one, WRAP, and CARE CARE if the product is for children. And the good news is you can go to those organizations and ask them, I visited this factory in Zhejiang, and they say that their certificate number is ABC123. Is this valid? And you can actually, it doesn't cost anything just to check. However, know that a factory that is compliant today maybe won't be so compliant tomorrow if something changes. So it's up to us as buyers to not trust but verify. We have to look at that document and realize that things can be photoshopped. I've seen a lot of documents delivered to me where the supplier says, "Oh, we passed the Disney audit and we're socially compliant," but then the year was 2011. If you look really close, so is that applicable today? Maybe not. So it can get you started, but don't rely on the supplier 100% to confirm if they are compliant or not. Of course, they're going to tell you they are, and most of the time they're honest about it. But if your customer is saying to you, business is dependent upon certain labor standards, then it's up to the buyer to confirm. We talked about relationship. I'm glad that came up. Maybe you mentioned how sometimes you're sitting there in Asia, both teams are smiling at each other. Even if there is a language issue, and you have an office in China. So how do you go about building that relationship? For example, addressing gift giving and entertainment. Any thoughts on how to be a good buyer?
We were talking about this before. When men travel to China, and I'm using China at the moment, it's quite well known that the Chinese people will take you out for dinner at night. They will want you to drink far more than they do, then you do karaoke. Well, I worked out really quickly that I was going to be a vegetarian and non-drinking because I couldn't do it. So you have to build that relationship, because that is their way of pleasing you and showing you how happy they are to have you there. So you have to find that go-between. So, you don't ask. We were talking about foods. The foods are really good. They're very, very different. They're nothing like you have here. You either ask and you just have to continue swallowing if it's bird stomach or chicken's feet, or you don't ask and you just enjoy the taste and you keep going. These are the type of things that you do have to, you can't sit there and say, I can't eat anything. You just have to go with the flow. And they actually appreciate it for you because there's been a lot of people before you and there'll be a lot of people after you. But if you're the one that sits there and takes their hospitality, then the relationship is far better because you really are nodding at each other for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, as you're talking about single points. So it's hard. Your translator's going 10 to the dozen. I was lucky enough, I did spend some time growing up in Asia, so I got to know people's body language. So you can tell by people's body language as well whether they're open to the costings you're pulling out or whether they're not, whether they're unhappy, whether they're not unhappy. You get the gist of it, but it takes a long time to learn.
I've now got an office in Shanghai, which we opened up there mainly to get the truth out of what was happening in logistics. It was a very tough situation where it'd be like, it's been held up, and it's like, why? Being held up, but why? And so in the end, we opened up our own office, and we have Australians in there and Chinese working in there, and we're able to get more information out of there. And as Jane was saying about just eating their meals, I always went with the model of not asking what it was until after I'd eaten it. But it's about that relationship that you would eat it, and sometimes you would just sort of force it down. But you didn't want to offend them because really they're taking you out to, they're trying to build a relationship with you. They want a long-term business relationship with you. And if you sit there and go, oh, I'm not eating that, I'm not eating that, they feel offended. And then when the negotiation starts about, can we talk about price, you've already got them on the back foot. And so sometimes you have to do things that you may not necessarily like. And you'd eat it, and then they would have a laugh once they would tell you that what it was. And then I'd usually just have 1 or 2 more pieces to signify, yes, it's not that bad. Or bread was a good one. You get something, you hide it in the bread and you just put the bread in and swallow it down. But it was about building that relationship, showing that I enjoyed being with them, I enjoyed their time and what they were offering me. And they really wanted to show you a good time. And then you can then start as friends to a certain degree. Let's start talking about price. Well, it's not quite what I was looking at for that price. Can we do something better? If you've got that little bit of relationship that you've had with them, well, then you can continue to negotiate on price. If you've just put them straight off of, look, I'm not eating any of this food, this is just terrible, they're just straight away going cold on you. And when you say, look, if I order some more product, can I get a better price? They're like, no, I've just wasted my whole day with you. You've offended me. That's the price. Let's move on. It's interesting.
Yeah, we could probably talk food stories for all day. In terms of the relationship, I found that if you're sometimes if the seller likes you, that actually has more power than the contracts or the pricing that you can achieve is based on your relationship. However, you hear the term guanxi a lot in Asia, which means relationship, and 15, 20 years ago, that meant a lot of like money under the table and helping them get a visa to your country. And those days are behind us. Now, building a relationship is more on just being friends like you would have with your suppliers here in Australia. So some of the things that I do is I'll take a little gift, not extravagant, not very expensive, just some nice wine from my hometown area. That'll be easy for Australians. And maybe a hat or a jersey of the local sports team back home. Sometimes I will, Chinese that love to gamble, so I'll say, I have relatives in Las Vegas. Would you like to come? Please visit my hometown near Niagara Falls. In 15 years, only 1 or 2 suppliers have actually taken me up on that offer. But the fact that I extended an invitation to come to my home, it showed them that I was serious about the relationship. And when you're a small buyer and a large to medium-sized factory, we have to work that much harder to show that we're a good partner, worthy of doing some business with, and that relationship helps. You can't base your entire purchasing plan on the relationship. You still need to have QC systems, you still need contracts, but the relationship is a key, one of the three components, I would say. So, the other things that I do, don't be the customer that calls your factory only when there are problems. You don't want to be the troubled customer. Sometimes I'll just call up the factory for no reason, say, hey, how was your Chinese New Year? What are you doing? What are you doing for holiday? Sometimes my children are pen pals with the children of the factory boss. That's really good. It builds a great relationship and lets their kids practice English. So there are ways that don't cost any money to build a great relationship with your supplier. When you're on the ground in China, you want to make the most of it. But even when you're back here, you can still use Skype, and a Christmas card goes a long way. So apply some of those. Just treat everybody like you would your friends, and you would be surprised at the dividends it pays in return. Well, people had their hands raised for quality control, and we answered, that's a big topic. Let's do some more on quality control before we move to logistics and others. Of those people that raised their hand with quality control concerns, what else are you worried about at the moment? And we have a microphone in the back. Okay, question in the middle, please.
So we are using a sourcing agent in China. Is it good enough to just, not good enough, but he has said he'll go to the factory and do our quality control for us. Is that a legitimate way to do it and worthwhile?
Well, using an intermediary can be a huge advantage, or they can be the cause of the failure. So if the intermediary knows China well, knows your product well, and actually provides value, wonderful. They can help you achieve clear communications and excellent quality that you couldn't on your own. On the other hand, some trading companies are very savvy at marketing. Sourcing agents look like, oh yeah, they're from Australia, they should be someone we can trust, and it turns out they don't have a lot of experience and cause more problems than they fix. So just like finding a good factory, you need to do your due diligence on the trading company, ask for references. Luckily, nowadays, there are plenty of professional agents to choose from. Make sure they've been in business for at least 5 years, have a track record, get some references, ideally have dealt with the same exact product that you're looking to buy. So also be aware that there's no code of ethics. There's no Chamber of Commerce, Better Business Bureau that governs the actions and ethics of the trading companies based here or overseas. So I run into a lot of agents where I think they're working for me, but in reality they're making a commission from the factory as well. And then when things go wrong, they try to convince me why I should accept the lower quality standards. So personally, I tend to use inspection agents for quality and use sourcing agents for finding and managing the supply chain. Because if you have the same team find the supplier and pay the supplier, there's a danger that at some point money comes under the table to ship out poorer quality. So the good news is there's so many agents out there. There's a good one that's perfect for you. The bad news is you might have to search a little bit to find the right one.
With when you are out there, and Jane was saying that she has a translator, one of the big tips I can give about translator is that you get your own translator. Never say, look, when they say, look, come to the factory, we'll have our translator. That means their translator, who may be an official outside organisation, but the factory has employed that person. That means that translator is working for the factory. So when the factory might say, look, we've got a few issues with quality, that may not be translated to yourself. So if you are going to get a translator, it's going to cost you a little bit of extra money, but you choose the translator. The translator is working for you and will then, tell you what they're actually saying. And sometimes they'll be saying something that you don't necessarily want to hear, but at least your translator is going to tell you. Be very wary of accepting, their translator.
Okay.
I would just say what the others said.
All right. Yes.
Just when you were talking about having one agent to do the inspections and another agent to look at the sourcing, are you paying them by commission each agent a commission? So are you doubling up on your commissions there?
Yeah. So the question is, how do you pay inspection agents and sourcing agents as they're doubling up of commissions? Actually, the sourcing is kind of very broad scope. It can range from logistics to quality control to supply chain management. But inspection is very specialized, like lab testing and audits. So generally the professional inspection agents, they charge a day rate. They'll travel to anywhere in Asia, including their travel for the companies that I work with, charge me about $300 US to go anywhere in the major metropolitan areas of Asia. And so you give them a list of exactly what to look for, and they don't care if you're buying diamonds or toothbrushes. Their rate to you is based on the time they spend rather than the value of what you're purchasing. That's very different from sourcing agents. Sourcing agents tend to charge a commission based on the value of the product that you're buying, and the sourcing agent you might assign them to manage the inspection agent, manage the laboratory, manage the logistics partners. So there's a lot of flexibility with the sourcing agents, but your inspection agents tend to just do quality control because of those ethical issues if they're both finding and doing the inspection.
They tend to be as well, if you go through, 9 times out of 10 you'll have a sourcing agent, but if you actually go through a quality control group separately, you actually find out the things that you didn't find out from the sourcing agent, and it becomes quite important. And that $300 could be the best $300 you've ever spent compared to anything else you pay your sourcing agent, which could be thousands and thousands of dollars. That $300 will actually save your business. So, yeah, they're worth it.
Dealing with sourcing agents, one of the things that I like to do is just be very open. How do you make your money? Because sometimes, as we mentioned before, they're making their money by a commission from the factory, and do they really work for you or not? Personally, I found that my rule of thumb is if the sourcing agent will let me know where the manufacturing is taking place, that shows that they're confident in their services, that they're providing real value in the supply chain. They're not worried about me going direct to the supplier and cutting them out because they're making my life easier as a buyer. So the really good sourcing agents will do things in a very open and transparent fashion. The ones that are saying, okay, you want to buy these pens? Yeah, I have a cousin that owns a factory in China. I'll get you a great price. You know, that's kind of dangerous if they really don't have a cousin. To give an example, many years ago, I got out of the airport in Guangzhou or somewhere up in the eastern China, and the cab driver picked me up and he saw that I could speak Chinese, and he asked me where I was going. And I said, oh, I'm here on a buying expedition. I'm looking for these products. He stops the car, pulls out from his trunk, brought the brochures out from local factories, and told me that his cousin owns a factory and he'd give me a special deal. Would he like me to go there? Could he be the broker? You know, come on. Okay, so is this cab driver going to stand behind the product when it misses the lead time? Is he going to pick up the FedEx bill to pay replacements? So you know, let's be realistic about the types of brokers, because the volume of money pouring into Asia is. Can you really blame them if buyers are silly enough to write a check to those kind of people? Can you blame them for taking our money? So it's up to us as buyers to find professional agents, professional manufacturers. Okay, on that note, we can tackle some more quality control issues if you have them, or we can move over to perhaps intellectual property. So let's do quality control or intellectual property. I saw a lot of hands earlier. Any questions remain? Okay, we have a question right in front.
I was reading about some factories have percentage rates of the faults, and that possibly you can factor that in when you're doing your negotiation. So could you talk about that? Like for quality when it's not good, when you've actually received it?
Yeah, for example, some factories, they have customers around the world, and the standard in Australia might be different for their customer in Jordan. And the customer in Jordan is used to accepting 5% defect rate on the pens, but you're expecting 0 defects per million. So as the buyer, we need to convey our expectations to the supplier, because the price will reflect. Sometimes the pricing is based on our quality standards, not the other way around. So it's up to us to specify. And if the factory, it's not just defects when the product leaves the factory, but more importantly, what's the expected defect rate in the market? That's what you really need to worry about, because if you have to go to your customer and deal with replacements, that eats up the margin. So you might want to talk to the factory and say, what is your average defect rate within 1 year of use in the marketplace? For example, one of our projects, we dealt with toys. And in the US, for example, the toy retailers have a no questions asked return policy. And so we did the calculations that roughly 2% of all toys sold are returned just because it was a gift and the person didn't like it, or they ran out of money and can't pay for it, so send it back. But 1% would have some type of problem. And so we built that into the relationship with the supplier, where every order they sent an extra 3%. And then we held that at the warehouse, and then at the end of the year we did an add-up of the parts that came back. They're not so much rejects, but returns. We said, okay, this 2% is still suitable for the market. We'll repackage them and sell them at a discount. This 1% actually have defects. We documented them because there was trust between the buyer and the seller. The supplier never asked for the products to be returned to China. And it was once a year we did an add up and sorted it out between us. The problem is, if you're just getting started, you don't know what those statistics are. So it might be worth doing a couple test orders initially. Don't go all in and then learn later that the defect rate is 10% when you're thinking it would be half a percentage.
We had a customer that was doing automotive parts, and they negotiated a price, and then the supplier had said, we will give you a 1% discount, which they didn't even ask for a discount. But what they said, that is our warranty. So we're giving you that discount. If something fails, well, that's something you have to wear. Don't return it back to us. We're not going to give you a refund for that product. The refund that we're giving you is that 1% discount. And that was just flat across the board that they had for all of their product. So they could have had a 100% success rate that everything was worked perfectly. Well, that customer ended up with a bit of a bonus. On the other hand, if they was a lower quality rate, they could have been worse off. But that was what the factory decided, that look, there's our price, and here's a 1% discount. That is your warranty, 2%, 3%, whatever you might decide. So what you can negotiate.
Jane, with your products, how do you handle the warranty and claim issues?
We do exactly that. We have 1% that's done on it. Luckily at the moment our return rate sits at about between 1 and 2%, so we come out even. The issue is if you had a bigger problem and you had to bring it back in, and then you've got to store it and you've got to photograph it. So any that come back in a year, look, I might only get 5 products back in a year. So it's not a lot, it's nice and easy, and it's really about building a relationship so that I can just go straight back to our customers anyway and say, we just replace it, there's not a problem, and quite often we'll say to them, you don't need to return it to us, because we know it's so low, because it's that whole chain, but we built it, the same thing, and it's worked well for us.
Thank you. Okay, we have plenty of time for more questions. Let's open it up for questions relating to anything relating to business, whether it's intellectual property, quality control, culture.
Just one more quality control question, and probably a maybe important question. Where do you get that information about the quality standards for the specific product that you're bringing in? Just that you have that sort of in advance.
Well, not so much on the quality side, but as in regards to the government regulations side. Now, they're out of the Melbourne airport, there's 200-300 odd logistics companies that specialise in customs clearance, and that's what we've got out there in Tullamarine. And so it's a matter of asking around, finding someone that's currently importing, looking up in the phone book, Google and so forth. But yeah, just approaching a customs agent and say, look, this is my product. What are the government standards that are needed to import that product? And so it's not that much of a harder process. Sometimes you'll get an answer in 5-10 minutes. Sometimes it's straight over the phone. We answer a lot of questions right there on the spot. Give us a minute, we flick through the book and say, well, look, there's only a few standards. Make sure it's got this, this and this. And other times it's, look, we're going to have to do some homework. We'll have to send you a whole encyclopedia on all the different standards. But it's imperative you're asking that in advance before you're confirming your order, because it's no use confirming the order today and then going to them tomorrow or next week and saying, oh, by the way, it needs to meet all these conditions, because the price may have been factored in on not meeting those actual conditions.
You realise as well when you're doing it, when you're looking at what the regulations are, if you are manufacturing, you've got a product manufactured under, let's say, an Oecotex rating, which is a green rating, when the product comes into Australia, you may not have wanted that tagged on your product, but you are saying that you manufacture under it. You may be asked here to show that certification. So again, you need to make sure you've got your paperwork that comes from the factory, that it is legitimate, that the year on it is this year, not 3 years ago. So make sure as well, whatever certifications you want, that you actually have with the bill of lading as well.
Can we rely on the suppliers to say that they have the certificates?
I try and do the due diligence on that one, and I actually go into the company. So I manufacture under an Ecotex rating, so I check every year that the manufacturer I'm using is still current and still registered under that rating.
And that rating, is it the supplier is rated or the product, because it's a proprietary product to your brand?
It comes through the first stage of it. So for mine, it comes through who produces that material. Then it's so, because remember then that you can have an organic label, but if it's an organic cotton, what was the manufacturing process? So the manufacturing process may not be organic, but you're still going to bring it in as an organic product. But really, the manufacturing was not organic. So you have to be very clear on what your terms are of what you want, and that gets very, very grey in a lot of areas.
We're finding that the government, through customs and the ACCC, are really clamping down on claims that people are putting on their packaging, and we've had situations where shipments have been held up and gone into storage because there's a particular statement that's been made, and the customs authorities are saying, we'll prove that that is the actual case. Now, if you've already got that paperwork, well, you can go, look, there it is, customs then release it, and it doesn't cost you any extra money. But we've had cargo that, where the storage has ended up being more than what the cargo is worth. And don't just think that you can turn around and go, oh, look, the storage is huge, I'm walking away. Once you've organised to bring it in, you have to pay all these bills and taxes. There is no walking away because it all got too expensive and too hard. So definitely get all that documentation in advance so that when the questions are asked, you've got the answer straight away.
Good advice. I believe you had a follow-up question?
It was actually a similar question. I just thought that possibly there would maybe be online sources for particular industries where, it's been quite clear so that you could just go through.
The Australian government, through customs, have got a great detailed website, which is just customs.gov.au. But the problem is that there is so many products in the world that you can possibly import. The website is massive. It's a very complicated type of website, and to try and find the information that you're looking for, we're in it every day, and even at times for us, we're hunting around for 10, 15 minutes just to find that one page with that bit of information. So yes, there are details online. Finding those details is a real challenge. And where if you can ring up a customs agent and they can give it to you within a minute or two free of charge, why would you sort of waste the time?
Okay, we have a question in the front.
Is there any potential or advantage in trying to prototype in Australia before you manufacture overseas? And are there many companies that will help you do that?
It's getting harder in a lot of areas. If you can do it, definitely try and do it, because it cuts out a lot of the confusion when you're doing a product. Depends what it is. So for manufacturing in textiles, there's very little manufacturing here in Australia anymore. So no. As far as electronics, we've still got some good manufacturers here. So yes, you can go to them and ask. But if you can do it, I would say yes, do it.
My advice on prototyping and design is it can be very dangerous, although it sounds logical to ask the supplier to do the design work for you. The danger is that even if you pay that supplier in Asia to do the design work, nail down the specifications, two things are going to happen. They're going to set the specs based on their production capabilities and based on their access to raw materials. So they would spec in that their cousin gets the mill of material. That the cousin's shop may or may not be the best option at an Asia, across all of Asia. The other problem is if you ever want to leave that supplier, even if you paid them, they have a sense of ownership to your technology, basically, what you've conveyed to them and educated them. So you might leave and find another supplier, and after you're gone for 6 months, they start running with your concept again. So I tend to work with a lot of engineering firms that are maybe Australian or American owned in Asia, where they understand the market expectations, but also the reality of what production capabilities are available in Asia. So that's been a good mix for me so far. Also, anywhere that there's an engineering university in Australia nearby, you will find some engineers that can help with DFM, the design for manufacturing. Just make sure that they have some experience with Asia. For example, if your product is going to India or China or Thailand, there's different production methods used in each of those places. So you could have the best engineering specs ever, but if it can't be made in Asia, you're not going to have any savings. So be very careful with engineering from both the intellectual property control and how can this design package be implemented at a factory.
Jane, you were saying that you've painted your product. Is that one paint for the whole world? How did you go through that?
If I had to say to people patent, I'd say no, don't do it, it costs too much money. But I can't say that because I'm still going. You can patent for your own country, so it's covered here, and then you can do a Madrid protocol. So Madrid protocol then allows you to choose selections of countries, but then you pay a yearly fee for those. I think my patent costs at the moment are running at about $80,000 5 years down the track. So it is not a cheap exercise, and we were copied, and we were actually copied in the US. And so to come back to those people, they came back with, but you're still patent pending. So I just absolutely tore shreds off them on an online site, and they, their customers went, oh, hang on, you can't do this, and I'm trying to go, yes, I can actually hold a patent pending. And much to my joy at the end, we got our patent in the US, which we spent a lot of time and effort getting, but the people that were manufacturing and copying us, everything went wrong with their manufacturing. Everything that could conceivably go wrong went wrong, which, I can smile, but it's actually going to damage our product in the US because people are going to associate us with that product. So, does your patent stand? It stands. If you want to sell it in time, that's what I like to do. But it's a really dicey field.
And that patent, people sort of think, well, once I've got that patent, I'm protected. It's like everything in law. There's nothing stopping anyone else making that exact same product. The only way you can really stop them of copying your product is by that threat of, I'm going to take it legal. And if they continue to manufacture that product, to stop it, you then have to get the lawyers involved. So it's not this blanket cover that you can wave at someone and say, there it is, stop manufacturing. If they're a big boy and you're a little one-man operation, they might go, yeah, technically, but stop it. So, it's great. There is no one patent for the whole world. You can't say, well, look, there's me 50,000, I've got the whole world covered. And it's a matter of sort of working out, where is my market? If you're only ever going to be importing into Australia, and that is your only goal, who cares if someone in Europe or the US copies you? It's not your market, so you're not overly fussed about it. But you do have to think ahead that, hang on, what happens if it does take off? Where are the various countries that I need to look at? And it can be quite expensive.
A little bit of good news is that China in particular has come a long way in terms of their intellectual property rights, and I think it's because 10 years ago they didn't have many brands of their own. Now that they have their own brands, suddenly they're taking intellectual property rights seriously. So keep in mind that China is a first to register rather than first to market system. That means if we're at the trade show and I see a cool brand that you have, and I go to Beijing first and spend about, I think it's now less than $1,000 US, I can register your trademark in China, and now you have to pay me to get it back. So if you're thinking about buying in Asia, even if you're not planning to sell there, it might be worth registering your trademarks and especially your patents in advance in Asia for two reasons. One, to prevent your suppliers from stealing your idea. Also, if you have that American competitor and they go to China, you can actually throw a monkey wrench into their supply chain by helping send a cease and desist letter to their supplier. Additionally, you might have some experience with this. China realizes that it's had a bad public relations issue with intellectual property rights. So in the past years, Beijing has actually been working with the customs offices in China to start enforcing brands. So if you're going to export Disney product out of China, Disney actually informs all the offices across, I guess it would be the customs authority, to say these are the licensed suppliers of Disney. You don't have to be Disney to do that. Even as long as your brand is registered in China, you can work with the customs authority. Maybe you can walk us through the process.
So pretty much any of those major Disney type of brands, all those big commercial brands, almost all of them are going to be inspected on arrival. We've got a customer who brings in mobile phone covers and they've got all the Disney characters for them. And they've been a regular importer, but every single shipment is physically being inspected. And then it's a question of where is the supplier? We want proof that the supplier has the accreditation, and then customs behind the scenes will then cross-check that is that valid. So if you've got any of those sort of big commercial brands that you're getting put on, all the Gucci's and all of those type of things, there is now a very high inspection rate. You bring cargo in and it doesn't meet the standards, it will be destroyed. So you've done your money on your purchase cost, you've had to pay the freight to Australia, you've had to pay all your duty and taxes and absolutely everything, and you've ended up with nothing. So when you're getting into those big commercial sort of brands that you may be getting on your fabrics or whatever it might be, definitely need to be doing some homework, because customs worldwide, in particularly in Australia, are all over it. The moment that they know that it's the Disney type of branding, the big Chanel and so forth, it's almost guaranteed to be physically inspected and verified. So it's a big issue.
That's a good point. So if you're thinking about importing someone else's brand, you need to be aware of counterfeiting. What about if the audience members here maybe have their own brand? They're not a Disney, but it is a registered trademark. Is there anything they can do with the customs authority either in China or Australia to prevent counterfeits from going across borders?
So into Australia you can, if you've got a registered Australian trademark, you can go, if you know that someone else is importing it, you can go to customs and advise them, look, we are the registered trademark of this design, this shape, or whatever it might be. And then customs will, at no cost, will actually go and investigate that other importer, and will actually take action against that other importer. So there is that bit of backup that you've got customs on your side if you are the legal representative of that particular product. So that's a definite. One of the great stories I heard years ago was Boost Juice. Everyone knows Boost Juice here in Australia. It was going so successful, and they decided that we're going to look at going into Asia. So jumped on a plane, landed in Hong Kong. Didn't realise they're already in Hong Kong. The same colour scheme, the same name, and once that first to market, someone had seen that idea here in Australia and went, Boost, great name, great colour scheme, took photos of it, went back, registered it in Hong Kong, and the Australians can complain all they want to the authorities in Hong Kong, but they didn't register the brand. And so when you're coming up with a name, do you want to be registering the website, rather than .au? Do you just go with .com? Asia, that very much first to register is a big issue. So be aware of things like that happening.
Okay, excellent point.
On websites as well, if you're thinking of being an online trader and you want to do that, as Mark said, the .com, even if you don't use it at the moment, if you use the .com.au, get your .com and park it. Look at the things that you may use in the future. It's, I think it's about $79 a year. It's not a lot, but it's $79 that means that you do have it. And the registry, you do need to do it. So have a look at it, and they're just minor little costs, but well worth it in the long run if your business becomes successful and you need them.
Well, I'm sure that there are some more questions out there. However, we've reached our hour limit. We do have just a few more minutes, and what I'd like to do at the end is just, if the audience takes away one point from each of us, let's tell them what we believe is the single most important part. I know that I haven't warned you, so I put you on the spot. I'll start with mine. I think if you only take away one thing from today's discussion, I want to stress how important it is to link the payments with the quality control. For example, first you have to have, we've already agreed that it's important to have well-defined specifications. What are you trying to buy? But you can really encourage the supplier to meet those specs when you say, all right, here's a deposit, but the next payment is not made until after you prove that you meet these specifications. Usually before the product is ready to ship out, you or an inspection agent would go to the factory and confirm that the product ready to ship matches the pre-agreed samples. As soon as that happens, the supplier is paid the next payment and the goods ship out. But if you don't have that quality gate linked to payments, there's no incentive for the supplier to get it right. I've had, early on in my career, I received a box of rocks one time, and the supplier, basically for cash flow reasons, they needed to get the payment to complete the order. So they knew that they would get paid once they provided a bill of lading. So they showed me the bill of lading on some product that wasn't what I ordered. I sent them the money, and then they said, oh, sorry, we made a mistake, but we need another month to complete the order. So eventually I got it done, but had I simply had a quality gate early on, the order probably would have shipped on time, and I wouldn't have had the drama that ensued. So my one point to take away is you got to do quality control, but structure it in a way that protects you.
I'll just talk my point about logistics. A lot of people are negotiating on price, and they'll then try and get the price down as low as possible. Then they'll allow their supplier to organise the freight to Australia. And they'll go, oh, the freight to get to Australia, it's $3,000. And you go, oh yeah, no dramas. And what happens is you've screwed them down on price and they've got no margin in it, but where they made the margin was on the freight. And so for them, at the end of the day, when they got a little bit of profit from the product and a good bit of profit from the freight, for them it ended up being a good deal. And so a lot of times it is easy for you to say, look, just get it to my door, give me an all-up price. It's simple, it's easy, you know what you're paying. But are you getting value for money? So one of the things I encourage to people is go and get two prices from them. When you're asking for a price, what is the price to get it to here in Melbourne? And what is the price just to get it to their port, let's say Shanghai? Then you come to a logistics company like ourselves and say, look, I'm bringing in a pallet, I'm bringing in a container. What's it going to cost me to bring it in? And then compare the prices. And majority of the time, it will become cheaper for you if you organise the logistics. You just say to your supplier, give me a price, packed up, ready to go, delivered to the closest port. Then get the price from someone here in Australia to bring it in, clear it through customs and deliver it. And I'd say 99% of the times, that's where you can actually save some extra dollars.
Mine's going to be understand your product, understand your market, and understand the quantity you will need. So when you're talking about what you're paying for, how you're bringing it in, what your costs are, look at how many items you are going to need and what your market is going to demand. Because when you do all those things, you can set a price thinking that you are going to bring in 500, but then you might want to bring in 500 the next month, and then you're going to bring in 500 a week for the next month, and you're going to keep doubling, tripling your product, but you haven't moved on price yet. So make sure you know your market, your product, and the amounts you want to order, because you can structure that in right from the very beginning. If I need more and more and more, what are my rates?
It's good to end on a positive note of growth then. Well, we appreciate your time today. Please join me in thanking our panelists and wishing you all success.